We've got Bernie Ripoll to talk to us today about what he's seen on the ground in Canberra about the Productivity Commission report, what's going on with APRA. Now, Bernie's background is he was former Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasurer. He was the Labor Minister for the Financial Services and Superannuation. He chaired the Ripoll inquiry, and many know him as the father of FOFA. So I think he's highly qualified to talk to us about what the feeling on the street is in Canberra at the moment, and what is perhaps politically feasible and what isn't. Bernie,
thanks, James, and hi everyone. Bernie Ripoll. What concerns me, though, is that we've come to this point in superannuation where there's almost a perfect storm of events. And what that looks like is that you've got a Royal Commission that's into misconduct, and that Royal Commission into misconduct is obviously focusing in a lot on the banks and bank misconduct, but it's also going to turn its attention to superannuation. And while I personally think there's a lot less to see, and I'm hoping that when it's the turn of super funds and elsewhere, that unlike the banks, the misconduct is low level, that it's not systemic, that it's not incentivised, and that it's not at the highest levels.
My biggest issue is the best in show panel. I think what worries me about that is if you have a system where some panel, some committee pick the best 10 funds, they've indicated that they're going to select that on healthy long-run net returns, fees, intra-fund advice, governance, and meeting members' needs. I didn't hear anything there about risk management. And so what worries me is if you've got like an English Premier League kind of system where the only way I am going to get into that top 10 is to get the highest returns, I'm probably going to start swinging for the fences. And the unintended consequences of that is going to be a completely different management of superannuation funds than what we've seen at the moment. Everyone I know who's in funds management in an industry fund they are prudent investors. The swing for the fences kind of people, they end up in investment banking or perhaps in some of the retail sectors. They don't end up in the superannuation system. And the governance framework that's behind that promotes people who are there for either their employees or their union members. And I think ironically what the Productivity Commission is trying to do is break that system, but I'm really concerned about the unintended consequences of them breaking that.
So look, I think you're right, James, and actually I'm a little bit surprised by the Productivity Commission's very blunt view on this best in show, just top 10. I think there are a whole range of problems that exist with that. It's a very simplistic approach. I think that just setting a number, a line in the sand on the number of funds that would be in that default top 10 is just problematic. Why not make it 9? Why not make it 11? I mean, it makes no sense. 10 is not a special number in any particular sense. I think also
what if the 11th fund is not that different from the 10th fund?
Spot on. So, I think they've also not really thought through this panel concept. And panels are problematic. They're usually always appointed by government. Governments tend to choose, pick and choose whoever might be in favour on the day or have a particular leaning one way or the other subtly.
Right.
So I just think there's a lot of problems with that concept. It doesn't appear anyway that the Productivity Commission has really unpacked fully. And you've raised, I think, a really important and significant issue, which is the metrics. How do you decide what makes up the metrics for getting into the top 10? So you're right, we didn't see risk there. There's a whole other range, I think, of metrics that should be considered. And rather than it being a top 10, which I think is silly, certainly there's more to consider here. What is important, though, what our listeners right now ought to note, is that as a principle, though, it does make some sense.
Right.
So that's the challenge here. So I think they've, very simplistic approach. It's blunt. They've got it wrong on a whole range of fronts. But as a principle, if the principle were to be that if you end up with a default fund, where people don't engage, particularly young people entering the workforce for the first time, that you might have a pool, but it could be more like a top tier pool. So all funds would qualify as long as they met a minimum set of standards.